What if I told you that some of the most memorable classic American cars weren't designed to please anyone? Designs that didn't aim for consensus, that didn't ask for approval, that split opinions from day one. Cars some people see as masterpieces, and others as unforgivable mistakes. Because there was a moment in American automotive history when design stopped playing it safe. Manufacturers got bold. They risked entire brand identities. They pushed shapes, proportions, and ideas further than anyone expected. Some of those cars were hated in their time. And today, they're icons. Others never stopped being controversial. And here comes the uncomfortable question. Does a design have to be beautiful to be great? In this video, we're exploring classic American cars that went all in on design. 1968 to 1977. Chevrolet Corvette C3. Today, it's considered an absolute icon. But when it first appeared in the late 1960s, the reaction was far from unanimous. Its design felt too radical, even by American standards of the time. A seemingly endless hood, exaggerated curves, flared wheel arches, and a silhouette that looked closer to a futuristic concept car than a production vehicle. For many traditional enthusiasts, the Corvette had stopped being elegant and had fully embraced excess. People said it no longer looked like a serious sports car, that it was too theatrical, too aggressive, that Chevrolet had crossed a line. And in a way, that's exactly what they did. The C3 wasn't designed to please everyone. It was created to make an impact, to represent an America entering the 1970s with less subtlety and more attitude. A Corvette that was impossible to ignore, even when parked. What makes the story more interesting is that the controversial design wasn't just for show. Beneath that debated body, the C3 could be equipped with V8 engines that were genuinely impressive for their time, with early versions producing over 300 horsepower. It accelerated hard, reached high top speeds for the era, and delivered performance that matched its aggressive appearance. That only made the controversy stronger, because it wasn't just a strange car, it was a strange car that delivered. Over time, perception completely shifted. What once looked like excess came to be understood as identity. What divided opinions ended up defining an entire era of American design. The Corvette C3 went from controversial to iconic. Today, the classic car market confirms it. A well-kept example typically ranges between $40,000 and $80,000, while exceptional versions or highly original cars can easily surpass $100,000. A car that was criticized for being too daring, and ultimately remembered for exactly that. 1958, Ford Edsel. Few names in American automotive history trigger such an immediate reaction as Edsel. For decades, it was synonymous with failure, poor taste, and one of the most misunderstood design bets Detroit ever made. When Ford introduced it in 1958, they weren't just launching a new model. They were creating an entire brand, positioned between Ford and Mercury, with its own identity. The ambition was massive, and so was the design. The front grille became the center of controversy. Vertical, oval-shaped, completely different from anything else on the road. Some saw it as futuristic and bold. Many others thought it was simply strange, uncomfortable, hard to accept. The press and the public quickly made fun of it, and the car was labeled before it even had a chance to explain itself. But reducing the Edsel to its grille misses the bigger picture. The rest of the design also broke conventions. Complex lines, a mix of conservative and futuristic elements, and a visual identity that didn't resemble Ford, Mercury, or anything familiar. It was a car that asked buyers for something the late 1950s market wasn't ready to give: patience and open-mindedness. The irony is that, technically, the Edsel wasn't a bad car. It offered strong V8 engines for the time, solid road performance, and innovative features, including unusual controls and fresh interior concepts. The issue wasn't engineering. It was a design that demanded too much from a public that still wanted the comfort of familiarity. The result was almost immediate rejection. The Edsel went from great promise to a cultural symbol of what not to do. And its production run was short, but time, as it often does, has been unexpectedly kind to its legacy. Today, the Edsel is no longer viewed with ridicule, but with historical curiosity. It's studied as one of the boldest design experiments of the 20th century, a car that dared to break the mold when breaking the mold was still risky. In today's collector market, a well-preserved Edsel typically falls between $25,000 and $50,000. A car that was mocked for being too daring, and now survives as one of the most important lessons in American automotive design history. 1971 to 1973, Buick Riviera. After the visual chaos of the Edsel, Buick took a completely different kind of risk. It didn't aim for strange. It aimed for something almost too sophisticated. When the boat tail debuted in the early 1970s, its rear design made an immediate impact. Inspired by luxury yachts and classic boats, that sharply sloping roofline and tapered tail looked unlike anything else on American roads. It was elegant, artistic, and deeply divisive. For some, it was a rolling piece of art. For others, it simply didn't make sense on an American car. The issue wasn't that the Riviera was ugly. The issue was that it didn't fit expectations. Buick was known for conservative luxury, safe lines, and comfortable prestige. Suddenly, it introduced a car that felt more European than American, more conceptual than commercial. The boat tail asked something unusual from buyers in that segment: to understand the design before accepting it. What's fascinating is that beneath its controversial silhouette, the Riviera was still unmistakably Buick. Large, smooth, powerful V8 engines designed for fast, comfortable cruising. It was an elegant grand tourer, wrapped in a body that sparked debate from every angle. The public didn't quite know what to do with it. Sales fell short of expectations, and the design was quickly discontinued. For years, the boat tail was seen as a failed experiment, an excess of creativity at a time when buyers were beginning to demand more rational cars. But time changed the narrative again. Today, it's one of the most appreciated designs of its era. What was once considered strange or misunderstood is now viewed as aesthetic bravery. In today's collector market, a well-preserved example typically ranges between $50,000 and $90,000, with exceptional cars easily surpassing those figures. And now, I want your opinion. Do you see the Riviera boat tail as a work of art ahead of its time? Or an elegant design that simply didn't belong on an American car? Let me know in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of car that defines the spirit of this video. 1975 to 1980, AMC Pacer. This doesn't look like a poorly designed car. It looks like a car designed without fear of anything. From the first glance, it broke every unspoken rule of American automotive design. Short and wide proportions, a rounded, almost inflated body, and massive glass surfaces that made it look like a bubble on wheels. It didn't resemble a sedan. It didn't resemble a coupe. It didn't resemble anything familiar. And that was precisely the problem. AMC wasn't trying to create a beautiful car. It was trying to create a different car. A compact, modern vehicle built for a future where efficiency, visibility, and safety would become priorities. Conceptually, the Pacer was ahead of its time, but visually, it was too much for the mid-1970s public. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Some saw it as fresh and futuristic. Most people simply didn't know how to process it. Its design was so extreme that neutrality became impossible. No one felt indifferent toward the Pacer. You either disliked it instantly or found it deeply intriguing. There was no middle ground. Ironically, from a functional standpoint, many of its ideas made perfect sense. Excellent visibility, a stable stance, and an interior surprisingly spacious for its exterior footprint. But the visual presentation was so dominant that it overshadowed everything else. It didn't fail because it lacked logic. It failed because it had too much personality. Today, that uniqueness has translated into unexpected value. A well-preserved AMC Pacer typically falls between $20,000 and $40,000, with highly original or exceptional examples reaching even higher figures. 1980 Cadillac Seville. When Cadillac introduced the 1980 Seville, it wasn't trying to be provocative. It was trying to be European, sophisticated, and modern. And that's exactly where the problem began. The rear design, known as the bustleback, completely broke away from everything people associated with Cadillac. That raised, squared-off rear end, inspired by European luxury sedans, clashed directly with the traditional American idea of elegance: long, flowing, and imposing. To many, the car looked unfinished. To others, it simply felt like a design mistake. What's interesting is that, from a positioning standpoint, the Seville had everything needed to succeed. It was compact by Cadillac standards, well-equipped, comfortable, quiet, and refined to drive. But the rear styling became an emotional barrier that many buyers simply couldn't get past. Cadillac wasn't wrong in its intention. It was wrong in its timing. That design required a cultural shift that hadn't happened yet. The market wasn't ready to see Cadillac abandon its traditional proportions in favor of such a rigid, formal visual language. For years, the bustleback Seville was viewed as one of the clearest examples of misunderstood luxury. An expensive, serious, technically sound car, but visually difficult for many people to love. Over time, perception shifted once again. Today it's seen as a bold experiment, an uncomfortable transition between two eras. It isn't beautiful in the classic sense, but it is deeply representative of a moment when American design was struggling with its identity. In today's collector market, a Seville from this generation typically ranges between $15,000 and $30,000. A car that never intended to provoke, yet became one of the most polarizing designs Cadillac ever produced. 1974 to 1978, Ford Mustang II. Few cars in American history were rejected before they were even understood, quite like the Mustang II. When Ford introduced it in the mid-1970s, the reaction was immediate and emotional. This is not a Mustang. This betrays the legacy. They've ruined the name. The problem was not only the design, although the design hurt too. The Mustang II was smaller, taller, simpler, and far less visually aggressive than its predecessor. In an era shaped by the oil crisis, emissions regulations, and deep cultural changes, Ford made a rational decision, but one that triggered an emotional backlash. It was never meant to be a muscle car. It was designed to survive, to be efficient, affordable, and suitable for a new reality. But the public was not ready to see the Mustang name associated with something so restrained, so domestic, so unintimidating. Visually, the car almost looked fragile. Soft lines, compact proportions, and a presence that never suggested rebellion or power. For many, it became the perfect example of a design that had gone too far in the wrong direction. And yet, here lies the great contradiction. The Mustang II was a commercial success. It saved the Mustang name during one of the most difficult periods in the industry. It sold well, kept the brand alive, and allowed the Mustang to return later with a renewed identity. It was hated by enthusiasts, but necessary for history. In today's market, the Mustang II remains one of the most affordable Mustangs. A well-preserved example typically ranges between $15,000 and $30,000, with special editions or exceptional condition cars reaching slightly higher figures. And now, I want to know your opinion. Do you think the Mustang II deserves the hate it has carried for decades? Or was it a misunderstood design that did exactly what it had to do at the worst possible moment? Let me know in the comments, because this car says much more about us than it does about Ford. 1977 to 1979, Lincoln Continental Mark V. While the rest of the industry was trying to downsize, simplify lines, and adapt to a new economic reality, Lincoln decided to do the exact opposite. The Mark V was gigantic, exaggerated, and deliberately ostentatious. An extremely long hood, massive body, nearly rigid straight lines, abundant chrome, and a presence that seemed to completely ignore the oil crisis and the shifting mindset of the late 1970s. For many, this car represented everything that was wrong with the American automobile industry at the time. It was not just big, it was excessive on purpose. Lincoln was not wrong by accident. It was defending a very clear idea of luxury: size, weight, presence, and absolute comfort. It did not apologize. It did not try to adapt. It was a statement of cultural resistance against a world that was beginning to demand moderation. And that was the risk. For some buyers, the Mark V was the last stronghold of classic American luxury. For others, it was a caricature, a symbol of excess out of place, a car that seemed stuck in a decade that had already ended. Visually, its design bordered on theatrical. The proportions were so extreme, they almost felt unreal. And precisely because of that, they generated rejection among those already looking toward Europe or toward more compact, rational cars. What is interesting is that, in its own context, it perfectly fulfilled its promise. It was quiet, smooth, comfortable, and delivered a driving experience isolated from the outside world. It did not try to be agile or modern. It aimed to be imposing. Over time, that unapologetic attitude became its greatest strength. Today, the Mark V is seen as one of the last great expressions of American luxury excess, a car that pushed that philosophy to the limit before it disappeared forever. In today's market, a well-preserved Lincoln Continental Mark V typically ranges between $20,000 and $40,000, with exceptional or extremely well-maintained examples exceeding that figure. 1960 to 1969, Chevrolet Corvair Monza. This is one of the most interesting risks in this entire video, because it was not controversial only because of its appearance. It was controversial for something much deeper. It dared to be un-American at a time when that was almost a sin. While Detroit continued investing in large, heavy cars with front-mounted V8 engines, Chevrolet introduced a compact model with an idea that seemed straight out of Europe. Rear engine, clean lines, different proportions, and handling that did not feel like a traditional American sedan. For some, it was modern and elegant. For others, it was a strange car that did not fit the country's automotive identity. The Monza, in particular, refined that concept and made it appealing. It was not just an experimental compact. It was a Corvair with aesthetic intention, a youthful touch, and a more aspirational identity. And that is where the risk lies. Chevrolet was trying to convince the public that a small, different car could be desirable. But the real debate exploded because of its configuration and reputation. The Corvair became marked by public safety controversies and discussions about its handling characteristics. That turned the car into an uncomfortable symbol. For some, proof that Detroit could innovate. For others, proof that innovation could be dangerous. The irony is that today, the design feels far more coherent than it did at the time. Its styling is clean, simple, and almost timeless within the context of the 1960s. It is one of those cars that, as time passes, feels less strange and more courageous. In today's collector market, a well-preserved Corvair Monza typically ranges between $18,000 and $35,000, with special versions or high-quality restorations reaching higher values. 1934 to 1937, Chrysler Airflow. This car was not controversial because it was ugly. It was controversial because it was incomprehensible for its time. In an era when American cars still followed square, separated, almost industrial shapes, Chrysler decided to apply real aerodynamic principles to the design of a production automobile. The result was a low, rounded, flowing car with proportions completely different from anything seen on the roads in the 1930s. To the mindset of that era, the Airflow looked strange, soft, even wrong. Many buyers distrusted it purely because of its appearance. It did not look solid. It did not look proper. It did not look like what a car was supposed to be. And that was the market's mistake, because technically, the Airflow was years ahead of its time. Its aerodynamic design improved high-speed stability, reduced wind noise, and delivered a safer, more refined driving experience than most of its contemporaries. It was not designed for the sake of design. It was engineering shaping form, but the public was not ready. The Airflow asked for something very difficult, accepting a car that did not resemble the past. And at that moment, that was too much. Sales were disappointing, and Chrysler was forced to quickly abandon the concept. Not because it was bad, but because it was too advanced. With time, history proved relentlessly fair. Many of the ideas the Airflow introduced became standard decades later. What was once rejected ended up defining the future of automotive design. Today, the Chrysler Airflow is considered one of the most important cars in American automotive history. Not because of its commercial success, but because of its conceptual bravery. In today's collector market, a well-preserved Airflow typically ranges between $70,000 and $120,000, with exceptional examples reaching even higher values. 1970 Plymouth Superbird. This car was not designed to be liked. It was designed to win, and that is obvious from every angle. The enormous aerodynamic nose, the absurdly tall rear wing, and the completely exaggerated proportions made the Superbird look, from day one, like a car that did not belong in everyday life. Many called it grotesque. Others openly laughed at it. On the street, it seemed like a joke that cost too much. But the Superbird was not built for traffic lights. It was built for NASCAR. Every visual decision had a clear purpose: reducing drag, increasing high-speed stability, and allowing Plymouth to compete at the highest level on the track. The problem was that to race it, they had to homologate it, and that meant selling it to the public exactly as it was. The result was one of the most radical cars ever legally driven on public roads. Visually, it crossed every acceptable line of traditional automotive design. It was not elegant. It was not discreet. It did not try to blend in. It was pure function turned into form, without any aesthetic filter for popular taste. And yet, beneath that almost cartoonish appearance, the Superbird was brutally effective. With high-performance V8 engines, including Hemi versions, it reached speeds no American production car had achieved before. On the track, it was dominant. On the street, misunderstood. The public did not know what to do with it. Sales were low. Many dealerships had to offer discounts to move units. The car was too extreme, too specific, too honest about its purpose. With time, that honesty became legend. Today, the Plymouth Superbird is one of the most desired and valuable American classics in the world. In today's market, an authentic example can easily exceed $300,000, a car that was ridiculed for its design, and ultimately revered precisely because it never asked permission to exist. At this point, one thing is clear: these cars were not accidental mistakes. They were conscious decisions. Some were hated from day one. Others needed decades to be understood. And a few still divide opinions even today. And now, I want to hear your final opinion. Of all the cars we explored today, which one do you think pushed design too far? And which one deserved to be defended from the very beginning? Leave it in the comments, because this video is not complete without that debate. And if you are interested in seeing how far boldness could go in another dimension, I recommend watching the video currently on screen. There, we explore the most expensive muscle cars of the 1960s. Cars that were just as extreme in price as these were in design. Machines that challenged not only taste, but also the wallets of their time. Click and continue with us exploring the boldest decisions in American automotive history. See you in the next video.